you've also talked about then the need for a new compact with the people of the state. Would you talk a little bit about how you see the pursuit of a new compact as an imperative?
So here's a nice softball for the president from the vice president for public relations. Actually, there's nothing wrong with this, and it's one of the first questions that I had in my list of 10 questions for President Brunings in an article for the Minnesota Daily. Unfortunately, even with a second chance, the president badly muffs the kick.
I've actually going to sponsor a forum on this particular topic late in September. I've invited Jonathan Cole as has been a long-term provost at Columbia University, who's written a very important book on the centrality and importance of research universities in our society.
So right off the bat, we're going to stack the deck by using a former Columbia University person. Not everyone is in love with Jonathan Cole's analysis of the public research university. As Claudia Golden, professor of economics at Harvard University, put it in a review that she did of this book in the New York Times Sunday Book Review, no one can for a moment doubt the special role universities play in innovations that arise from research in pure science and an interest in solving problems. But a 150-page inventory, like the one Cole provides here, tells us as much about why some universities are great as a list of names of accomplished people in a large family shows us why their family is great relative to others. Moreover, it does nothing to illuminate whether universities did it alone and what kind of incentives were used to enhance researcher productivity. President Brunings, I'd suggest that if you are actually interested in a conversation or a dialogue, rather than a monologue and in hearing what you want to hear, that you might consider inviting someone who has a quite different view from Jonathan Cole about research universities today. An alternative view, and one that would better inform a discussion at the University of Minnesota, is to be found in the excellent book Unmaking the Public University by Christopher Newfield, a professor of English at the University of California, Santa Barbara. I'd suggest to you that someone like this, a person with a background in the arts rather than the sciences, and a person at a large public university, would be a valuable addition to your conversation next fall.
During this last 8 to 10 years, actually, yeah, at least I'd say more like last 12 years in Minnesota, the governors of this state have not made higher education a priority. They give speeches on the future of the state of Minnesota or the issues facing the state of Minnesota. They have typically not mentioned higher education except as an afterthought or as an object for criticism. I've become increasingly concerned about the growing divide between the citizens of this state and country and the people who comprise our academic colleges and universities, public and private.
That's quite a generalization you're making there, Bob, and I disagree. I'll just use one example, that of Gordon Gee at Ohio State University. As I'm sure you're aware, he seems to have quite a different relationship with the state legislature and the citizens of the state. Why do you think this might be? And I'm afraid it's not just because Ohio State has a good football team. To illustrate this, all you have to do is look at the University of Wisconsin and see how the University of Wisconsin is perceived of by the citizens of the state. It certainly appears to me that the citizens of Wisconsin hold their university in much higher regard than our citizens do. Why is that, do you think?
K-12 system. But if you lose the University of Minnesota, you have lost your ability to be a leader, an intellectual leader, a leader in arts and culture, a leader in the economy. You have you've essentially disarmed yourself. You've given away your opportunity to really lead in the global economy. And
Bob, this is exactly the kind of rhetoric that gets you into trouble with the citizens of the state. We are not talking about rubbing out the University of Minnesota. We are talking about returning to our land grant priorities and operating within the means that are available to us. Wake up.
At one time, the state thought its public institutions ought to have 65% of the funding for the cost of education from the state of Minnesota. That is perilously close to 15% now at the University of Minnesota on this campus. And
cost of education? Be very, very careful when you use these words. Make sure that when you say cost of education, you are referring to the actual amount of money that is being spent for the education of students. Be very careful to make a distinction between the cost of education and other costs at the University of Minnesota.
Other campuses around the state. I don't think that's a very good recipe for the future. So what I'm really arguing, and I think we have to be a part of it, is for a compact that defines what is special about the University of Minnesota, what we do, what we're obligated to do on behalf of the citizens of this state and I think the people beyond the state. Clearly we're a national and international university. And then what is the responsibility of the state of Minnesota? If we do our part and we deliver for the state of Minnesota, what's going to be that long-term vision for our state?
Bob, as you say this, you're quite well aware that your proposal for a new covenant with the state legislature was declared dead on arrival in St. Paul the day after you made it. Why don't you be honest about this?
Now, I'm not naive enough to think that starting that conversation is going to increase a big appropriation in the next 2 fiscal years.
But you are apparently naive enough, President Brunix, to expect the legislature to negotiate with you on this matter. Let me remind you that you are a lame duck president and that this matter should perhaps be best discussed with your successor.
Now, people, let me read you from the book. It ain't necessarily so. It ain't necessarily so. The things that you're liable to read in the Bible, it ain't necessarily so.